Thank you, everybody, for joining us in this webinar with two very, very accomplished individuals and experienced KAATSU specialists. I don't know how you're looking at the screen, but the young lady who's below me is Kenzie, and the young man to my left is Jessie. I have complete 100% trust in both of these individuals. I've seen and heard what they do with KAATSU for years now. And we'll have ladies first. I'd just like, Kenzie, if you could introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do, and how you're involved with KAATSU, and maybe even one or two stories that you have, success stories with your clients. And Jessie, the same with you after her.
Yeah, so I'm Kenzie. I am based right now out of Boise, Idaho, and I went to Boise State University, got my bachelor's in kinesiology with an emphasis on rehabilitation. And so with that, I went and got a few more certifications, one of them being a KAATSU specialist, as well as personal training, and then corrective exercise specialist. Been using KAATSU for quite a few years now. It actually helped me repair a PCL tear in my left knee, and it's honestly better than it was before, which is awesome. And usually doesn't happen post-injury. And then I have quite a few clients that I work with on a pretty regular basis in our one-on-one sessions, and I've just heard a lot of positive feedback and seen it as well with both strength and then muscle growth, and just helping people work and live a better life.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessie.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Jessie Salas. My background is I started as a firefighter, as a professional firefighter in the city of Orlando for about 17 years. Was doing strength and conditioning within the fire service, helping firefighters with their wellness journey there. And then I had an injury. That injury led me into a training system called Foundation Training. And consequently, it ended up pulling me out of the fire service as I was seeing how it was affecting people around the world with low back pain, chronic pain issues as a result of modern lifestyle. And fast forward about 15 years now, I've come in to be the program director for Foundation Training, which has me working in a lot of different arenas and walks of life. I've got everyone from world-renowned piano players to the highest level in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu martial arts. And we're seeing the same exact breakdowns in chronic pain and injuries. And as KAATSU came into my world, is with a client. And I like to tell everybody I was the most resistant to it, actually. And I think I went from being the most resistant to probably one of the biggest fans. And it's just been, every time I'm around people like Kenzie, Steve, I'm always absorbing more information, learning another approach. And, it's just been one of the biggest, probably the best tool that I've been able to incorporate for both chronic pain as well as bring out another level of elite performance, and down to just helping my parents stay strong, 79 years of age, and they're addicted to it now. So it's just become the best tool I've found, and excited to share a little bit of how my approach has been and answer any questions I can help with.
Thank you very much. I want to actually, before we get in, there was a very famous basketball coach at UCLA named John Wooden. And he was very famous for obviously winning national championships, but also he had amongst the best college players of his generation that he coached. But the first day of every practice, the first day of every season, he taught the boys how to actually put on their socks and shoes properly. And I know it sounds very basic, but I'd like to actually just do a 2-minute brief on how to put on your KAATSU bands properly. Because if you can put on the KAATSU bands on your upper arms and upper legs properly, then everything else follows very easily with KAATSU. And typically what I do is I put the band through the buckle, slide them up on my arm, and I'm going to. We always recommend that you put it over clothing, but I'm just going to put it up and bare my arm so you can actually see better. And just that little crease in your arm between your bicep and your shoulder, you want to get it in there. And you want to fit it in there very nicely. And we say snugly, but not tight. And one of the big advantages of KAATSU is that these bands are elastic. And then you want to cinch it over, and you don't have to cinch it over so tightly in the beginning. Ideally, you want a 1 finger a tightness between the band and your skin. In other words, you can put 1 finger in between your band and your skin, but not 2 or 3. So if I try to force 3 fingers in there, I couldn't. If I try to force 2 fingers in there, I couldn't. And if I try to force 1 finger in there, I can. So that's the tightness. Now, if you have Raynaud's disease, some kind of neuropathy, or other issues, you don't have to put it so snugly. You can actually loosen it up a bit so you can get a 2 or 3 finger tightness. So 2 fingers or 3 fingers, I loosened it up, and now I can get 3 fingers in there. But for most people, this 1 finger tightness is appropriate. Now, after you put it on, and this is a phenomenon that may surprise some people, then you do your KAATSU cycle. Do 1 or 2 cycles, and then guess what? Because your vascular tissue becomes more elastic, you can actually tighten your bands incrementally more. You don't have to, but you can. You will feel a pump in your muscle, but actually, because the vascular tissue is more elastic, you can actually tighten the bands on slightly more. And that is how you put them on your arms. Now you put them on the legs in the same way. And because the legs have a bigger circumference, after you do 1 or 2 cycles, you can cinch it a little bit more on the legs. And we say this because some people say, well, I did what you recommended and I don't feel anything. You don't have to feel anything, but if you can see a pinkness, a rosiness in the palm of your hands or your feet, you are doing KAATSU. That means the blood is going in normally and is being modified or slowed down every 30 seconds coming back out. So that is how you put on the bands very snugly, tightly. Remember, if you feel any clamminess, coldness, if you feel any sort of uncomfortableness in your hands, forearms, or arms, just take the bands off and then retighten, put them. It may be sometimes the buckle of the band is touching some nerve under here. And so just a slight changing of it will help. So with that, we also joined by our Chief Performance Officer, Chris Morgan. He's from Boston. And so what we're going to do now is we had 2 questions ahead of time that were sent in to us. And then I see 2 people have raised their hands with questions. So we'll address the questions first, and then we'll get to people who have raised their hands next. And then we'll just have an open discussion with questions that you can just pop into the Q&A down below. So the first question, and I had it up here, was to Jessie. And the question is, can KAATSU and Foundation Training be used together? And what are the benefits if you do so? So go ahead, Jessie.
So thank you, Steve. So absolutely. I mean, to me at this point, I don't really ever see a reason not to marry them together unless you have somebody who's just very really in this purist mindset of they want to make sure they're doing everything in FT perfectly. But it's I'm just going to give the example of my dad. He does foundation training every day, and typically a foundation routine is somewhere between 8 to 12, 15 minutes tops is my preferred goal for people. And when we bring KAATSU into the equation, what I have personally found, and picking brains with everybody, because it's always, how do you feel? That's my number one question when we do any exercise, is that they feel more connected into their body. And now when we say more connected, it means that we're turning up that brain to body connection we're looking for, that ability to integrate and coordinate more of the actual, we can say muscle change, but the ability to fire various muscles in the body, being able to go into what we would call a sphere of tension. And as we squeeze the fingertips, we're bringing a isometric component. So we're contracting muscles without movement. When we have the KAATSU on.
Excuse me, Jesse, I just realized perhaps not everybody on the webinar actually knows what foundation training is. So
Okay.
maybe just step back and give us a brief overview of what is foundation training, and then talk about the marriage of the two.
Absolutely. So foundation training is a series of corrective exercises that was developed by a doctor named Eric Goodman, initially to address his back pain. He was in school to be a chiropractor. They wanted to do a double spinal fusion because he was having so much back pain. And, he talks about this on his TED Talk, that that's a big no-no in his world. And so he kind of went into this mindset of, I need to figure out how to address this. And he started finding certain movements were getting him pain relief. He started putting the anatomy that he was learning in school behind it. Lo and behold, he developed this system that's primarily about bringing pelvic stability from below the pelvis and outward expansion from above the pelvis. And so all of the exercises are designed ultimately for a clinical setting first, for addressing back pain is where it started. But now we found in the process where, it's addressing knee pain, hip pain, shoulder issues, nerve-related issues, because so much of our focus is on not just good posture, but outward expansion of the rib cage. And what we're finding is that when we start to pick ourselves up off of essentially ourselves, everyone always adjusts their posture. We start talking about it's a natural phenomena. But when we really start thinking about this, just taking up space in our body, and then we start learning how to integrate what we call decompression breathing, where we're actively thinking about not just being here, but elevate the clavicles. If you're watching, I want you to do it. Tap your clavicles and bring them up. We think about lifting the ears up and in line with the shoulders. You can see my neck muscles are kind of engaging a little bit, the sternocleidomastoid muscles. So we're looking at them as pulleys. So we go into this position and we think about the rib cage actually expanding. So we take a breath in, and our goal is to not let that drop when we exhale. And then we expand again. And then we exhale. And so there's a tensioning of your extremities towards center with an outward expansion of the rib cage away from center. And that tug of war that we start to teach people how to do in their body starts to bring space to the joints, bring space to the spine and the discs. We start opening up space for nerves down the spine. We start aligning and taking pressure off of major points where people seem to be collapsing in and on them. Specifically, I'm thinking about with chronic headaches, the vagus nerve. We're talking about breathing. We're not collapsing down in our lungs. We're getting up and off your solar plexus, which is another big bundle of nerves under here. And so there's a lot of brain to body connection that has to happen. When we're in this position now, and everyone can do it with me, we'll bring the hands out and we'll start here. When we bring the hands out, we're still maintaining that chest up position. With the palms here, we can push them together and think about the elbows wrapping. And now as we push the palms together, we're thinking about a lot of pressure to the low edge of the palm, and we lift up and we just hold that. And we're in an isometric. We can think about with the chest up, pulling our shoulders down away from our ears, our armpits towards the floor, and we squeeze just a little bit harder. You might feel the muscles under the arms engaging. You might feel muscles through the arms across the chest. The goal is collective integration of muscle chains around the idea of external rotation And then with that external rotation, we start thinking about the rib cage expansion. So it becomes a very challenging process to coordinate, that we didn't even bring in the lower portion, that we would have the legs together squeezing to engage muscles up the inner thighs to stabilize the pelvis from below for upward expansion away from that. To go back to the idea of KAATSU integration is, for me, that ability for people to feel that integration happening in the volume, I'd say brain to body connection. And we're really thinking about that neuroplasticity of being able to make the nerves fire through the extremities, that when we're in this position and we say wrap the elbows and armpits towards the sides of the body, we've done this practice enough that the sensation of the lats start to fire just a little bit more, that we then peel this into what we would call a sphere of tension. And if you notice, I'm trying to have every finger joint bent. I'm trying not to have my arms look like this, my wrists bent, that we're providing this expansive lengthened position. So we lengthen everything out and then we tension, and we start training the isometric component to stabilize that lengthened muscle again, so that we naturally are more in this lengthened, tensioned concept of your muscles are now absorbing force rather than your joints. Bring KAATSU in the equation, you start to do this isometric, you're going to feel that engorgement happening, and that, we'll say, BF KAATSU impact turn up just a little bit more and just a little bit more. And for me, knowing the cascade of hormones that we can elicit when we're doing anything with KAATSU, it just starts to become a no-brainer on why we want to wear it when doing FT. Not only do I want them to improve their posture, relieve their back pain, improve their breathing, make space for digestion, make space for nerve flow, but I want them getting that growth hormone. I want you to be eliciting that restriction of blood flow return and you feeling this connection turn up just a little bit higher. And I'm watching my professional athletes take the armbands off after about 15 minutes of foundation and a few upper body exercises before we start the lower body portion of training, which again, I refer to it lower body, upper body, just based on where the bands are. But ultimately, everything is about a full body integration. But I see their energy start to shift about 5 minutes into starting the lower body portion. And I know that we're getting that KAATSU effect. As Steve said, the minute the bands come off, just because they're off, we're still doing KAATSU. I'm watching it real time with very young athletes, but getting to watch it with the elderly like my parents, it's just too awesome to not go. Bring them together, get the most out of your training, and recognize that it's not, we need to set one period of time aside for the gym. That the more we can integrate movement and corrective movement patterns throughout the day, we're setting a stage that when we go into the gym, we're moving from the primary muscles first, as opposed to say, I've been here all day compressing on myself. Now when I go to move, I'm using my traps, I'm using my levator staps. I'm not up expansive sternocleidomastoids, the big shock absorbers of my neck, keeping space, and things coming from big powerhouse muscles, center mass out, as opposed to these little tight ones here and kind of compiling into compression, which we see come out as shoulder stuff, neck stuff, various kind of cascade towards chronic pain. So for me, it's the why for wake up and put KAATSU on in the morning. Start the process. We don't have to wait for this one moment to train. A few foundation exercises to align posture, position, breathing, the way we're integrating mind-body connection, and then thinking as rather than one big moment, there's these micro doses of movement and training and breathing that we sprinkle through the day. And then maybe we have one big session. But the more I can get people just integrating through the day, the happier I am, because the human body is meant to move. So I hope that helped answer that question.
Yeah. And Jessie, I met you a few years ago, and it was, I knew you knew the body well, but you knew the body and mind connection even better. And the reason why I say that is when I started to learn under Dr. Sato, the inventor of KAATSU, he said originally to me that isometric holds with KAATSU would be the best form. He said, but lots of people would rather do movement. And he said, both are necessary. But the real he called it the finisher, if you will. The finisher of his workouts are these isometric holds. And Dr. Sato, he started out as a power lifter, then he moved to being a bodybuilder. And you can imagine at the end of a workout, he just sort of holding. And Jessie, and I know very well, when you're in that pose that you're doing with, standing up, you can't hold it very long. Your muscles, it's pretty great. So thank you very much for mentioning that the isometric tension augments the effects of KAATSU. So that was great. And then the second thing that, again, it was like you were taught directly by Dr. Sato. You were mentioning micro movements throughout the day. And that's exactly why Dr. Sato, from the 1970s on, he was always encouraging people to use KAATSU throughout the day and the office, at the home. Just do little things with KAATSU. And that cumulative effect would be really, really helpful and allow the body to be as resilient as it always was meant to be. So thank you very much for that, Jessie. And just so people know, is there a website? Is it foundationtraining.com?
Yes, but if you're wanting to actually start today and do foundation training, our streaming platform is ftstreaming.com. And there's a Build Your Foundation program where for the first 30 days, you're learning essentially how to do the exercise right, where setting up super detailed, where to be moving from, how to move, where you should be feeling it. And then we've got various programs we have a 65 and up program that I recommend to the youngest people, because what we're seeing now is that there's so much time sitting and on tech and on devices that we're really losing our ability to have that brain body awareness. We've got everyone walking with the insides of their feet leading the way, the pelvis curls under, the upper body adapts, the head follows. And so what we're seeing a lot is that people's ability to recognize where their body is in space seems to be going down. And I just was at a conference over the weekend, and there's a fascia expert talking, and a few other experts that hit on the same topic again and again about proprioception and the ability to recognize where your body is in space and how you're moving. The highest level athletes have the higher levels of proprioception. And so that to me is another huge why for not only foundation training, but KAATSU, and honestly, all training, when done correctly and with the right coaches, is recognizing when we slow down and we really recognize how are we moving, where are we moving, what are we feeling when we're moving, are we in the muscles, are we in the joints? It becomes a game changer. And I love the ISOs, but I do think you have to go from the static pose of movement into more dynamic training, sessions based on what your goal is. Chronic pain, a lot of ISO for a while, because again, there's a lot of research coming out on just the collective impact for ligament strength and connective tissue of the body being healed through isometric holds and challenging those positions. Because once we get into an ISO where there's no movement, but we're contracting, that we start to have a bigger effect on the connective tissue itself, in addition to just muscle belly and the stuff that everyone looks at. It's like, I want to build that up. But to me, more than the aesthetic of like how strong do we look, I'm more now like what's the quality of our connective tissue, because that's what's going to keep the joints holding together. That's what's going to make you feel more like a spring when you're walking, when you're moving, when you're playing pickleball, tennis, golf, whatever it is. And then making sure that when we go into rotation or other patterns, that it's pelvic guided rotation first. And so some of the exercises are very much that. It looks static, it looks slow. We associate, well, I need to be doing all these other things. And I say for everybody, there's a time and a place. I like to slow everybody down and then take the brakes off. Muscles are firing, stabilizing, supporting, get after it, which is what you did with the athletes the other day. It was mind blowing, and they're in love with it now. Steve came to a training facility with me and put some of these high level fighters through a little KAATSU taste in his version. And now it's our version, is what I would say. And everyone's like, when are we doing it, coach? So thank you for that, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. And just so people who don't know, you can go to KAATSU.com, and if you wanted a one-on-one session with Kenzie, she's always available. So, and I'll address the second question to Kenzie, and it comes from Vicky. She's 66 years old, and she says, I'm strong, but I don't want to lose strength when I get older. How often do I need to use KAATSU to maintain or even get stronger? And Kenzie, how would you explain KAATSU to a 66-year-old woman who wants to stay young?
Yeah. So generally, I guess like I would typically lead off with a few follow-up questions. First one is like, how long have you been using it? And in that duration, how often? Oftentimes I meet with people, especially for one-on-one sessions, where they've had their device for 6 months, but they may have just used it 5 times. What I would always recommend for people starting off, if you've never used KAATSU before, and if you don't have a background in being physically active, start off just trying it twice a week. Going through low pressure, do it once on your arms for about 4 to 5 cycles on, or 4 to 5 sets on cycle mode. And then for you, Vicky, I would say if you're using it hypothetically right now 3 times a week, and you're doing exercises throughout those 3 sessions, I would recommend incorporating what I refer to as like a passive session, where I'm not intentionally putting them on and then taking my body through exercises or movements, but I'll put it on while I'm doing dishes, while I'm mopping the floors, cleaning the house, or even if I'm going for like a walk in the morning, I'll put my leg bands on. And so I would say I would have your goal be getting 3 to 4 sessions a week where you are intentionally exercising. You are intentionally going through anywhere from 3 to 4 exercises and then performing 3 rounds of 10 to 12 reps per exercise, with, again, like the focus being on your time under tension, and kind of like what Steve and Jessie had mentioned is that proprioception, that mind-muscle connection. So really thinking of being intentional with the movements. So if we take bicep curls, not just going through of, okay, I need to bring my hand from down by the side of my body up to my shoulder, but almost visualizing. This helps with a lot of clients, where I visualize your muscles as like Twizzlers ropes, and you're trying to shorten those fibers as we're coming up. And if we're actively thinking about it, more often than not, you're going to get a greater stimulus and it will be more challenging throughout the workout. But we are also working to improve that mind-muscle connection, as well as increasing essentially our threshold for it. So if you start with, okay, I have 4 days out of this week, I'm going to do 2 upper body sessions, 2 lower body sessions. And then maybe 1 day out of that week, I'll do a passive, where in the morning, I'll do my arms, 4 to 5 sets, low pressure on cycle mode. And then in the evening, I'll do my legs. And then from there, working on different variables that we can change if you want to get stronger. So a couple of those variables, it could be the amount of sets that you do. So maybe we'll take it from 3 sets of 10 to 4 sets of 10. The reps, so maybe I'll go, instead of 3 sets of 10, maybe take it up to 15. Or you can even add weight to it, or a little bit of resistance. And if you don't have equipment at your house, I would always encourage my clients to get creative with it. You know, most of us have really big jugs of laundry detergent sitting in our house. We can use those as kettlebells, actually. Or if we have a lot of books, maybe we throw them in a backpack or like a tote. And then you can use that to increase essentially the intensity of the workout.
I never thought of laundry detergent. That's
I
a tool.
All the time, actually. I use
That's great.
often, and I will use like big jugs of Costco laundry detergent.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great. Thank you very much. Now we'll get into the individuals who raised their hand. I see Robert Davidson raised his hand, and you can either speak out loud or appear. I don't know actually how you appear, but Robert, the floor is yours. Let's see, Robert Davidson. Or Robert, if or you can actually have put it in the chat room, and I can repeat it. Anybody else who has have raised their hand, go ahead and let's see. I think I actually need to, Robert. Let me find you, Robert. Robert, I'm looking for you in the attendee list, and I see your name, but oh, here we go. There you go. Robert, I think I just clicked you to permit talking. Sorry about that. Okay. Go ahead, Thomas.
So I have a simple question, and then just I'd like to get the reaction of the group. Simple question is, why do I have to have a shirt underneath the band? It's a pain in the butt to keep it under there, especially with short sleeve shirts. That's my question. My comment is that I started just wearing the bands, walking in the evening, on the legs or on the arms, and I've gotten very quickly into, I do sets of 6. I start at low, I go to medium, I go to high, and I'm either just doing nothing or just living, or I'm in the gym working out. And is there can I overdo it? I'm finding no restriction in terms of its impact on me in any negative sense. And I already sense that the muscles, that the arms particularly, are getting bigger and more fulsome. I'm a very, very lean person on my extremities. So those are my questions and comments.
Okay. So I'll take the first question. The reason why we recommend the bands go over clothing or any kind of fabric is for especially our young men. They tend to perspire a lot. And if you can imagine these bands over 6 months, never being washed and just being absorbent of male perspiration or female perspiration, it does get a little stinky. In fact, very stinky. So one is just simply cleanliness. And the second is probably more appropriate, is for many people, if they do perspire or if they have moisturizer or something on their body, if they do certain movements, let's say you're doing Kenzie's laundry detergent kettlebell exercises, it could slip a little bit, especially if you're doing something very vigorous. And so for those 2 primary reasons, not absorbing perspiration, and 2, not allowing movement. Those are the 2 primary reasons why we recommend overclothing. But if you never share your bands with anybody, no problem. And 2, if you don't have any problem with the bands moving, which it appears you do not, because you're using them throughout the day or so long, that's okay too. So these are our recommendations. Your second question is actually quite profound, and you're doing it perfectly. A lot of people can do KAATSU in a high pressure. They can do it. But you can do more when you start off in a low pressure. Think of our vascular tissue like a rubber balloon. When you first blow up that new balloon, it takes a little bit of effort for that balloon to expand. Same thing with our vascular tissue. We want to warm it up, and starting out low, then going to medium, and then going to high. What's happening is you're allowing that vascular tissue to become more elastic. And in fact, that's allowing you to continue doing KAATSU throughout the day. You're doing it exactly how a Dr. Sato had intended and had hoped KAATSU users would eventually use KAATSU, literally throughout the day. Now, can you do too much? We do have a lot of type A personalities. We have a lot of celebrities, athletes, business people, teachers who actually get injured. We've had, like Jessie, a fireman who he was snowboarding, got injured. The snowboarding accident was not covered by workers' comp. So he absolutely had to rehabilitate as quickly as possible. He was a man, I would say, late 30s. He readily admitted from his waking hour to his sleep time, he had that band on almost 16 hours a day. I would say that's too much. I would say give it a rest a little bit. But the reason why we have the cycle mode, which is 30 seconds on, 5 seconds off, is so people can do KAATSU in a sustained manner. And there would be no the reason why you would probably want to take it off is if KAATSU, through a buildup of lactate in the muscles or some impedance, some uncomfortableness, it would just be too much, and then you would take it off. So, for example, when Jessie is working with, he mentioned about the fighters. In this case, we did quote 3 rounds of KAATSU, and the first round was very slow motion KAATSU. We were actually asking the athletes to go through their movements very, very slowly, like super slow motion, and the bands were on low. Then we asked the athletes to go in a fast motion. Again, the bands were on, and it was on the low pressure cycle. The third round was they took the bands off, and they were going through their motions at full speed, as if they were in a match themselves. So they had slow motion with bands, regular speed motion with bands, and then the third was a fast motion without the bands. And they did that 3 times. So they did 3 rounds of 3. And for a fighter, Jessie, I don't know, I was there 20 minutes, and these were, Jessie, you could tell one of the guys, he's a world champion. This guy is fit upon fit, and we had him gassed. Now, on his off day, when he is recovering, let's say from 3 hard days of workout, or maybe he had a competition, he could do KAATSU like you do. Just use it when you're waking up. As Kenzie mentioned, you're brushing your teeth, combing your hair, folding clothes, and doing other things. So there's no real limitation of KAATSU as long as you're doing the KAATSU cycle mode and you're doing it responsibly, meaning you're not overexerting. So I hope that answered your questions.
It did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And then next one, person raised hand is Craig. You have the floor, Craig.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I am a personal trainer myself, and I think I've seen some of Jessie's work in the past. Been doing this for 25 years, and I've had the KAATSU bands, but like Kenzie said, I've used them, like I've had them for a couple of years, got them during COVID, barely use them, but I like the idea of incorporating into more regular daily life kind of thing. So my question specifically is, I've been doing, I incorporated weighted vest walking, or rucking as it's called, with my dog in the morning, just as a low level cardio activity. So I was thinking adding it to that. Is my takeaway that I should put it in the cycle mode? And is there, like, if I've been doing my question is, if I've been doing the walking's not new with the weighted vest, but the new thing will be adding the KAATSU. Would you, that I'm fairly fit, would it be safe to say that I should be, I walk for about half an hour? Would I, okay to just fire that KAATSU on and go for the half-hour walk? And, or is there any, build up to, since the activity's not new?
Yeah. So the rucking is great with your dog is great. Adding KAATSU would, I don't want to go as far as saying it will wipe you out, but it will make it significantly more a difficult exercise. And, Jessie and Kenzie, jump in here, because I didn't do rucking. All I did was walk my dog when I first got KAATSU 25 years ago. I would say after 500 yards, I was wiped out. I was shocked how much it was in there. So if you want to do that half an hour walk, what I would say is put it, maybe do a 2-finger tightness to begin. Use low, cycle, and just see how it goes. But it's really gonna make a difference. You're really gonna. It's a great suggestion, and I welcome that you want to try that. Go ahead, go for it. Kenzie, Jessie, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I would recommend, like, if I was rucking consistently and I wanted to add KAATSU, the approach that I would take is I would start with first just putting my armbands on for that walk, and then low pressure for 6 cycles. You can restart that as well if that's not giving you that full 30 minutes, and then see how your body's feeling. If you're like, "Ooh, that really made that ruck a lot more challenging," I would maybe taper it to trying a 15-minute walk with the leg bands the next day. But I do tell this to a lot of my clients too, like, as you might have said this as well, Craig, but at the end of the day, like, your body the best. We obviously are educated. We have all, like, the tips and tricks that we can give, but ultimately I would encourage you to experiment with it, especially if you want to use it for clients. I've definitely taken that approach with my clients as well, but I would just recommend start with your armbands, start on low pressure, cycle mode, see how that feels, and then try it with the legs. I would imagine, like, worst case that happens if you're 15 minutes into your walk and you're like, holy goodness, I'm gassed. Take the leg bands off and just carry them for the rest of the walk. And then you kind of know where that threshold is. So now we have a new baseline that we can continue to work up to or work past.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Kenzie with, given that you started by saying you've had them, but they've kind of been in the equation, not necessarily a huge part of the equation. I would go with her and do the armbands, and even, when you're hydrating and warming up, start there with them on. And then my big one, I love rucking. Like, I've done versions of, honestly, just KAATSU rucking. My biggest complaint with rucking is that most people have so much load that they look like this when they're rucking, and they collapse underneath that load. So my thing is, I'm always really big on, if anything, reduce the amount of weight you're rucking with, and just go about your KAATSU session like that, and then see, like, do we increase the load? Are we good? I know when I've done it with the KAATSU bands, I think I had 12 pounds on my weight vest, and I was very happy. And I did a 30-minute, California hill hike, and it definitely hit the goals that I was looking for. So, I mean, how much are you walking with, Craig?
Is my audio still on? Sorry.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I'm using a 20-pound vest, and I'm limited to the 30 minutes just because I have to walk the dog and then get to the gym. So I like the idea of adding the KAATSU, which I hadn't thought of just how else, other than adding more weight, how can I make the 30-minute session more productive? So I think I've summarized it with possibly try no resistance first with the KAATSU, go to two fingers instead of one finger of tightness, use the cycle mode, and as Kenzie said, maybe be open to, like, may not be the whole 30 minutes the first time I go out. Unfortunately, I can't cut the walk short, or the dog gets shortchanged and will be giving me side eye if we turn back at 15 minutes. So unfortunately, that's the one variable I kind of got to leave the same. But I think that summarizes your suggestions, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Do you know that we do KAATSU on dogs? So yes, we actually do KAATSU on that. We've actually rehabbed military dogs and other dogs. These some dogs obviously don't like that buzzing sound of the compressor, but we have done KAATSU on dogs, horses, and goats. So just an aside.
One other question: the unit you're holding up, mine might be an older unit that has the tubes to it.
Yeah.
Is that a more modern, where each one has its own compressor?
Yes. So we have, this is actually the newest model, but we also have the B2 model. And those were actually suggested to us because we had a lot of older people in VA hospitals and other places where the tubes would get in their way. Their balance was off, or they were paraplegic, etc. So the B2 model is a model where there are no tubes, no connector tubes. It allows more freedom of movement, and then we also actually are able to track all your usage.
Oh,
and
wow.
So Chris Morgan, who's on here also, he does a lot of work with professional teams, and so it's good when they hand a unit to an athlete and the trainer suggests to the athlete, okay, use this, twice a day, etc. And the coach could actually track if the athlete is indeed using it or not. So, as we expand, we're now in 70 countries. We're getting a lot of different feedback. Can you do this and that? And one of the big drawbacks from our earlier units was having the tubes. And, whether you're a golfer or a tennis player, we've had professional tennis players who wanted to use KAATSU on the court, or a PGA golfer who wanted to use golf on a driving range. And obviously the tubes it doesn't work. And so we developed this, we call it B2, B for Bluetooth. And then this is called the M1, and they're just entirely, this one is actually, it's done with infrared. The other one is done with your mobile phone with an app. So,
oh wow, cool.
Yeah, it's on the website.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I haven't been to the website since I ordered my original kit.
Okay. All right. Kim, you are now up. Kim, you are free. Oh, wait a second. Sorry.
Okay, great. I think can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you all. I have learned quite a bit today. Very educational. I appreciate it. And the questions have been great. The question I have is in regards to a patient with acute, subacute, and chronic vertebral fractures, meaning the acute is approximately 4 weeks old, and working with the FT and the KAATSU on a very gentle, low pace, and suggestions that you might have for that, please.
Yeah. Where are the
vertebral fractures? Vertebrals are going from, I think the Smorls node was what did it, from T12, and then it went from T12 to T5, and then the lower lumbar, unfortunately, is also from L5 over to L1.
Yeah. So what we recommend here is what we would recommend for people who are quadriplegics, are paraplegics, are hemiplegics, etc., the individual can actually do the KAATSU cycles in low pressure. Are they mobile?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely mode. Very active. Very, very
Okay.
active.
Okay.
In the 60s, mid 60s.
Okay. So again, as Kenzie suggested earlier, or Jessie, I think too, start just sitting down, being relaxed. Do a few cycles while they're not moving in low pressure. And then it's always very important. And in fact, I'll put the band on. And it's always very important to look at the color of their hands or their feet when they do KAATSU. What you want to do is, and this is really, there's a lot of people say, well, how tight is tight? How tight is snug? What do you mean by that? And what we really mean by that is we want the limb to be engorged in blood. And you can see that in two ways. One, you can see this is the hand. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the hand without KAATSU, and this is the hand with KAATSU. And you can already see the hand with KAATSU has more pronounced vasculature. It's pinker. It's getting pink. And I haven't even turned on the band. What you want to do is engorge that limb in blood, whether it's the arms or the legs. And so that is your first goal. The second goal is actually to check that you're having adequate arterial flow or blood from the torso out to the hands or feet. And you could do that by what we call capillary refill time. And that's when you press a thumb or a forefinger into your hand or in the quadricep or the calf if they're wearing pants or something. And you want to make sure that the blood comes back quickly. So if I press here and release, you can see how quickly that blood comes back, probably a second and a half. So I press firmly and I release, and you see that blood come back quickly. If I pressed and I release, and it took 1001, 1002, 1003, and it was still blanched, it was still white, that means that this band is acting as a tourniquet, like a blood pressure cuff. And that's not what KAATSU is all about. The KAATSU is keeping the blood in the limb. Why do we want to do that? That's a catalyst for many other things that happen in the body. And so with going back to your patient, working with that individual, starting off as they're sitting down, do at least 2 cycles, make sure they're comfortable with using KAATSU, the way it feels. Some people just don't like the arms. Just the arms are not for me. Chris knows well. There are some people, largely skewed male, and these male athletes tend to be younger. When we put on their bands, they almost faint. They literally faint. They have what we call white coat syndrome. They don't like their blood pressure taken or anything. We put them on the legs, no problem. But so always check with your patient that he or she is comfortable with the bands as they're sitting down, relaxed. They don't have to do anything.
Okay.
From that point, you want to check their capillary refill time. And you can see I have the bands on now longer, and it's actually coming back quicker. And so you want that pinkness, that rosiness in the skin. You want the veins to start popping out a little bit. I know with my wife and my daughters, they don't like the look of their own veins popping out, but they know now that they don't have to look at their hands. They can just continue on. And then go through the therapeutic movements that you would do anyway. Nothing that KAATSU does, we don't dictate what the movements should be or can be. we make suggestions, but you just do what you normally do with your patient. You just do it with KAATSU.
Okay, in regards to sittings, I know that's the compression fractures are creating a lot of pain, nerve pain when the sitting. So, with that being the case, if I'm lying them there flat on a PMF mat, pulsed electronic magnetic field mat, would that be appropriate just to lie them flat?
Yes, that's okay.
Okay.
Perfectly okay.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the PMF at the same time.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Jessie and Kenzie, did you have anything to add?
I don't. Jessie?
When you asked about starting, this question came up this summer. I was out over the weekend, and the big impact of breathing, having the KAATSU on, but letting that person work on feeling the rib cage expansion, learning how to leverage their transverse abdominis when they're exhaling, so that we are teaching, once they start to learn how to expand and elevate the rib cage without letting it drop, we're thinking about lengthening deep paraspinal muscles. We're thinking about the posterior serratus, anterior serratus in working in conjunction. The going back to transverse abdominis, teaching these muscles how to accurately lengthen and hold space and stabilize and inadvertently take pressure off of those discs. Fundamental like working on that breathing component, working on, abdominal breathing and bracing with the KAATSU bands on is still going to be challenging, but they should be able to start finding and feeling greater degrees of stability for their spine. And then for me, like if they're able to lay there with, say their feet are flat, their knees are falling in to where we're allowing them to be long up the floor. We're not trying to mash their low back down. We want to keep their natural spinal curves, but let them squeeze their thighs together and feel the adductors. That's where we started looking at bringing spinal stability from below the pelvis integrated with that rib cage expansion and stability, where we think about the finger trap of the two ends pulling apart and creating this traction. It can become very, very powerful for that individual. Add in, if they're laying there and they have their arms going, they're pushing, without thrusting the rib cage, they're able to spin the palms so every fingernail bed is against the ground, and they're helping feed into external rotation. They're lengthening their neck on the floor, allowing the sternocleidomastoids to be there, and just thinking about breathing the rib cage wide. For me, we're going to start to elicit a little bit more intensity to the arms. And my mind, again, is like, if I can get that hormonal cascade for the injured person, I'm going to look at where I can do that without inducing pain or essentially going back. But it's, as you know, Kim, it's a back and forth on how they're feeling in the moment. But with those tools, I'll then slowly work my way to what can we do seated decompression. Then how are we feeling to come to a standing decompression? We've got, a handful of supine and prone decompression exercises that play off of all of these principles. So in my mind, there's quite a bit that opens up for the individual based on their comfort as they go. It sounds like they're very active. And so if I can get them feeling confident with it and the homework to follow, I'm going to be really happy, because I feel like we as the practitioners with them make the impact, but them being empowered when they're away from us to keep it going till next time we see them, they're feeling better with what we've given them, and you can build from there. That's always going to be my goal.
Great.
And most people I work with ultimately first find me for back pain, just to be clear.
Oh, that's such excellent feedback. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Now we have 20 questions. And the first one is from Michael. And I started this off with the explanation of where you should put the bands on your arms. I didn't mention anything about the legs. And the legs should be, if you can imagine a pair of men's briefs or the bottom of a women's swimsuit, sort of high up in the groin, but angled outwards towards your outer thigh. So, imagine just a pair of men's brief or a woman's swimsuit, just high up on groin angled outwards. That will allow most comfortable movement of your legs, whether you're walking on a stationary bike or what have you. The next question is, what is the difference between the KAATSU C4 and the KAATSU B2? The ones with the tubes and ones without the tubes. There are many differences. I think most people see the biggest difference is the price. The B2 is about twice as expensive as the C4. The C stands for connected or cycle. And that's what we call our workhorse. In fact, when I was at Jessie's gym with all the jiu-jitsu and MMA fighters, it's hardcore. This is the model that the special forces soldiers use on military bases, because there's a lot of, they have the unit there and soldiers come in throughout the day using it time and time again. So it's very robust, very hardy, but it doesn't capture any information. So you use it and you leave it and it doesn't remember anything. It doesn't record anything. The B2 records everything. So you can look and go, well, what did I do yesterday? Or what did I do a month ago? Or what did I do a year ago? And it records all of your usage data, which for a lot of people, they enjoy that. You can also share that data with your coach, your physical therapist, your physician, your spouse, your partner, or your workout buddies. And so a lot of people like that function. They might be two people who live in two different states and they share the data. That data is shared by email. That's another difference. The C4, you can actually disconnect the tubes and do very complicated movements. You can box, you can play tennis, you can do golf swings, you can swim with the C4 unit. The bands are made of neoprene. The B2 bands are also made of neoprene, but the controller unit is attached permanently to the band. So the controller unit is not waterproof. So the B2 you can't use in water. You shouldn't get it wet. So some other differentiating points is the B2 or the Bluetooth series. We are constantly adding new features to that. So for example, we have right now, it's the data can sync with a Masimo pulse oximeter. We will sync with, for example, in the future, an Oura Ring. We will sync, for example, with a Lumia earpiece for people who want to check their cerebral blood flow. So being digital, we can start adding layers of connected devices to the unit. Before C4, it's a standalone device. B2, because it is a device that has Bluetooth, some people are not sorry about that. Do not like EMF, so they avoid that. The differences are actually on our website somewhere. I don't remember where, but if you did have, we have a detailed explanation that we can email you. Just email us at info at KAATSU.com, and we can provide that, the pros of each of the different models. Next question is from Michael. In the near future, I will have surgery to repair umbilical hernia and to remove my gallbladder. What is your recommendation on how to use KAATSU for rehab? Actually, what Jessie just explained in the previous to Kim would be also very nice. We generally say after surgery, wait 72 hours. And that's not because KAATSU will cause any issues. It's more because you want to make sure that you're stable from your surgery. Always 100% when you're rehabilitating from surgical procedure. Use a low pressure. Only use cycle. Don't use the constant mode. Be very well hydrated, and all the other do's and don'ts that we have. Kenzie, I think you fielded a lot of questions about rehab. Do you have other things to add?
Not anything that I don't think has already been said. I would say just as like a general guideline, many people, I feel like when we get out of surgery or if we experience an injury, we're really quick to just wanting to jump right back to where we were pre-surgery. And oftentimes that's actually where we get lingering injuries or we start to experience pain throughout that rehabilitation process. I would just say my biggest encouragement is don't hold yourself to the same standard that you held yourself before, but understand like we've changed the variables. We've changed the rules almost to the game. And so listen to your body. If you feel like you are pushing it a little too much, do not be afraid to scale back. That's not a character flaw. You're not doing anything wrong, but you do want to make sure like we do rehab to help our body, not to create more issues for us down the road. So keep it simple, start small, and then work your way up in a progressive style.
Great. Another question is from Anonymous. What are the recommendations for washing stinky bands? Hand wash only. We actually encounter this often in hospital settings. Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City is a very, very busy hospital and physical rehabilitation setting in the middle of Manhattan. So what they do is, as you can imagine, they take the alcohol wipes, and after every use, they wipe down the bands. We do not recommend that you put them in a washing machine, but you can also hand wash. But really, the best thing is probably from what I've seen from our busiest users, because those bands in Mount Sinai Hospital are probably used, I don't know, 30 times a day. They are just used from morning to evening. And they also have I forgot what you call it, ultraviolet light sterilization box that they put them in overnight. But your typical what do you call it? The alcohol wipes would be the best thing to do, and you can occasionally hand wash them also. Next question is from Rick. Aloha, Steve and Jessie, on week 3 with KAATSU. I'm following your manual that says add a set each week until ideally up to 6 sets per session. How many times a day and how many days a week is ideal as time goes on with light weights and without? As Kenzie just said, it depends on the individual, depends what your goals are. Dr. Sato, he's 70, he'll be 77 years old this year. He does KAATSU 3 times a day. Now, of course, he's been doing KAATSU for all his adult life. But myself, I do KAATSU at least once a day and more likely twice a day. I don't use weights with it, but I'm typically sitting at my desk or on a conference call with KAATSU, either on my arms or my legs. The reason why we want people to gradually build into KAATSU is because we'd rather be cautiously safe and aggressively unsafe. And so, as Kenzie said, listen to your body. You know, 2 times a day would probably be, you know, on the very upper ends of usage. We know there are people who use it 3 or 4 times a day. We know that. But they've also listened to their body. Light weights is good, but it doesn't have to be weights per se. As Kenzie said, she has the Costco laundry detergent kettlebell swings, and I'm sure there's other things. I know if you have large beach towels and you fold those, that's a chore. If you wash your car with KAATSU Cycle, that's a chore. Chris Morgan lives in Boston. He, after snow, he's shoveling snow with the bands on. And so I think it was it Rick who was going to do the rucking with his dog? You could do KAATSU with any movement or activity that you're doing. So it doesn't have to be weights. Weights is good, but you can be creative. I know Kenzie and Jessie, you've been creative in everything you've been doing with KAATSU. Do you have any tips for Rick?
Kenzie, you go first.
My biggest recommendation would be starting off with experimenting on increasing your volume versus increasing the intensity right off the bat. And what I mean by that is starting off with increasing your sets, your reps, maybe even the pressure setting that you're using with the bands before we begin to integrate a higher intensity regarding the load that we're doing. So oftentimes, especially with my one-on-one clients, if they get to a point where they're like, okay, like this workout is not as much of a challenge as it used to be. I feel my body progressing, but I still want to keep upping that threshold. We might start off doing 2 to 3 sets with low cycle or low pressure, and then we'll go up to medium for that. Or as stated previously, like I'll increase the reps or the sets that we do them. Generally, the weight or the load or intensity, that's the last thing that I'll increase, which is kind of counteractive to like most traditional resistance training. But it's also where, one, we are allowing our body to adapt to that new, essentially, elasticity for our vessels or veins and arteries without, well, I guess, like minimizing risk and just making sure that we're keeping the focus on safety as well as like progression with what you can do with your own body. Because I see it often where people want to jump right into doing weights and they're like, okay, let's do, weighted walking lunges. They might not even be able to actually do walking lunges with just their body weight with proper form. So just making sure that you are being mindful of your form, being mindful of your posture, and then increasing that weight toward the end if we've already increased our volume or the pressure setting.
Thank you. Jessie?
No, I mean, that was beautiful. I think, Steve, my biggest thing has been, and correct me if I'm misspeaking to this, was the impact it has on the viscosity of the blood in regards to those red blood cells going from this clump. I like to think the poker chips are all stacked to they're free flowing through the system. And so for me, my big one has been with everybody is like, put them on and just go about your morning, drink your coffee, have your water. And that to me is typically leads people to kind of like, I'm going to do a little bit of something. But, as Kenzie said, is more, and I've heard you talk about this too, Steve, is more time under tension instead of worrying about how intensely we're going about the session. But my mind after the trip to Japan really went from this idea of just train to these collective health benefits of having them on. And honestly, not going through the motions of life, but going through your activities of daily living. And whether or not it ever gets intense, that doesn't matter. But like having the bands on, going through the flow. My dad, it's been, hey, put them on, have your coffee. Before you're done, I want you going through 12 minutes of foundation, and then, take the dog for a walk. And if he does that twice a day, we're really happy. I just told him, knowing him, because he's a slacker, I'm like, hey, you can't do it enough because I might get 2 sessions out of him. But when I was there last, I love seeing he's working on laying a cement slab with his KAATSU bands on. Now it's probably turned off by now and dead on his arms, but he's still working, and he's still getting some kind of benefit. But I think looking at that other aspect of what you're really doing for global health, and just, ease like anything, ease into it, right? We want the stress of training to be something your body can adapt to, not something that is beating you, what was it, iocane powder and the Princess Bride, right? A little bit every day and you're okay. All the iocane powder at once and the little guy drops dead. Anybody who knows Princess Bride, you'll get the reference. Mm-hmm. But my big gauge with everybody's been like, you should not be feeling beat down the next day. In fact, like that's been my biggest love of it, is like, hey, if we're doing this right, we're waking up the next day and we're feeling pretty good. Like I did something, but I'm not destroyed as if I went and just grinded it out. And so I've given that as my marker for many of my friends, is like, if you're feeling beat down, you're going too hard, so I'm just going to echo you guys, as like, ease that stress on.
Perfect. Next question is, can KAATSU be done while swimming, or should it be done separately? The answer to that question is yes and yes. So KAATSU is used by many Olympic swimmers, swimmers who swim across the English Channel, water polo players, divers, and triathletes, etc. You use KAATSU in swimming for a few different reasons. One, it's and you can't use the B2. That model can't go in the water. The C4 and earlier models, they can go in the water once you disconnect the bands. We recommend that you disconnect the bands and just keep the bands on without inflation, at least in the beginning. And then you can use it just slow swimming, just very comfortable slow swimming. But you can also use it just walking in waist deep water. We have a lot of athletes who use what we call athletes and soldiers who use what we call KAATSU Aqua. They have a lower body injury and they're doing aqua therapy anyway. They're just adding KAATSU to that. We don't recommend that you swim with it more than 10 minutes at a time. That's fine, but you could do lots of things. We've had people get a ball, let's say a water polo ball or a beach ball, and just try to submerge it in water and up. Put hand paddles on and just sweep your hands backwards and forwards or up and down. There's a lot of things you can do in the water. It's very gentle. Additionally, and this is how I use it, I do swim. And what I do is I do KAATSU before I get to the pool. It's just my form of warm up. So when I wake up, brush my teeth, get ready to go to the pool, I have the bands on. So you could do it separately, as I do, as many other people do, or you could do it while you're swimming, doing something very specific. One really good benefit of swimming with KAATSU for a competitive swimmer, and this is why a lot of elite swimmers use it, is when your hands are engorged in blood, you improve your tactile feel. And as your hand enters the water, you can actually improve your swimming stroke. Chris Morgan is our resident Olympic swim coach, and he teaches this all the time. So improving your swimming technique is very easy with KAATSU. Next question is, do you have any written protocols available for reference? Yes, we have lots of written protocols. In fact, we probably have too many. I was just our staff, one of our interns got added up all the questions we've answered. I think over the last I don't know 6 months, it's 196 full pages of single type font. We also have the KAATSU 101 course. That's free to anybody who buys a unit. And we have lots of other information. If you want something specific, just email us at info@kaatsu.com, and we can provide you with written protocols in reference to longevity, rehabilitation of connective tissue, bones, skin lacerations, muscle rupture, muscle tears, etc. For performance. Performance doesn't always necessarily only mean athletic performance. We have dancers, ballerinas, musicians, drummers, guitarists, pianists. When we talk about human performance, it ranges from snipers to MMA fighters, and you name it. So any form of human activity. We have all the winter sports athletes, the skiers, the mogul racers, the ice skaters, to the Olympic sports. We have arm wrestlers, you name it. We have protocols for all of these different activities. We're almost getting toward the end. So is there a WhatsApp number for sessions with Kenzie to connect or ask? I'm actually going to put the one-on-one personal session information for Kenzie in the chat. So you have that there. But under KAATSU.com, you can go to, I'm going to look at it right now. You can go to support, and under general support, there's one-on-one personal session. So she's listed there. Next is from Kevin. Can I start on low in my legs? Previously, I believe the recommendation was to start on the arms and then move to the legs. Kevin, your question is often asked. We start on the arms. Our standard protocol is you start on the arms and then go on the legs. The reason for that is because, remember, we did our testing on over 12,000 people, including those who had cardiac issues, meaning heart attacks, strokes, or some kind of heart disease, at the University of Tokyo Hospital. And at the hospital, we tested these 12,000 people over the span of 10 years. And in those 10 years, we found there were some cases where people would put the bands on their legs first and then do something vigorous. It could be something like squats or leg press or even a spinning bike. And then they took the bands off their legs. And they did that in the constant mode. When they did that, what happens is a rush of blood, because you had all of this blood engorged in their vascular tissue in their legs. Then they took off the bands, and suddenly that blood had to go somewhere, and it would come back into their thoracic cavity, their heart, and that caused some problems. So, what problems? Meaning they got lightheaded, they got a little bit dizzy. They're in a hospital, so there was no issue. They were under the care of cardiologists and the cardiac rehab staff. But we learned from that. And therefore, our standard protocol is start in the arms, then do the legs. Now, there's some people who don't like arms or prefer not to do arms or like to do the legs first. In this case, always 100% start on the low pressure, 100% do the cycle mode. Don't go vigorous, don't go constant, because we want to avoid this issue that we had with a small number of cardiac rehab patients. So we have these protocols because it's proven true over the decades we've been doing KAATSU. So you can start on the legs if you want, be well hydrated, start on low pressure, and cycle mode only. Let's see. And I think, okay. And next question is, what is your data in regard to KAATSU usage with stage 4 melanoma? Since cancer needs blood supply to multiply, does that make the KAATSU grow faster if KAATSU bands are used? What does your data show? We have many users in stage 4, pancreatic, skin melanoma, breast, prostate, and lung. And when we think of blood supply, our blood will be moving anyway. What KAATSU is doing is it's isolating the blood in one location that is a catalyst for a variety of other sources. We actually, our data shows it's actually quite helpful, and our practical anecdotal testimonials from our cancer users is also very beneficial. We have that information. If you would like it, we can send it to you. Just email us at info@kaatsu.com and repeat your question, and our staff will get the information to you. Let's see. And there was another question about the location of the bands on the legs. Again, just think of a pair of men's briefs or a pair of women's swimsuit, and just follow that line along the groin. Another question is, it would be very helpful to have a person on a table to demonstrate the different suggestions. Yes, it would be, but we're not set up for that right now. Next question is, this is a very newbie question. I just purchased a set of the KAATSU B2. My measurements were right on the line between medium and large. I chose to order large, and they seem so long. I realized there's a charge to return or exchange. Is there any therapeutic downside to using 2 large bands? There's not a therapeutic downside, but there is a comfort and practical downside. Rob, just send your same question to our info@kaatsu.com, and we'll take care of you. Don't worry about that. We try. The KAATSU should be okay, but if, for example, you put it on the bands, and let's say the band was hitting this part, and that's no good. So we can make that exchange, and that's not a problem. So info@kaatsu.com, just explain the situation. Let's see. Next question is, this is just a compliment. 2 weeks new to KAATSU. I'm rehabbing a bicep large head tear, and I feel decidedly better. Recommending to everybody I see, and getting some strange looks. Love it. Thank you very much, BT. Dr. Gordon asked, I joined late. Sorry, my leg bands are falling off when I perform standing exercises or squats. Hints as what to do. It's tied to one finger, but still issues. Doctor, this is a common experience that we have. We always recommend that you put your leg bands on while you're sitting down. Many people put the leg bands while they're standing up. When we're standing up, the girth of the leg is actually larger. When we're sitting down comfortably with your bottom at the edge of a chair, put your bands on to a one finger tightness. stay sitting, do a KAATSU cycle, just one cycle, take 5 minutes or 6 minutes. Then you'll notice you can actually tighten the bands a little bit more, maybe even as much as an inch, but maybe a half an inch. And this additional tightening after the first KAATSU cycle, more than likely will not, your bands won't fall off. So one, put the leg bands on while you're seated. Do at least one KAATSU cycle while you're seated. Then retighten the band. Just hold the buckle and tighten it just incrementally more, maybe a half an inch. And then that should be snug enough so it doesn't slip down. Next question is from Robert Raymond. I wonder if KAATSU would help my trombone playing. Well, judged by the number of quite famous musicians that we work with, we would say yes. Again, most of the well-known names that we work with, if you're like me and grew up in the 60s and 70s, you definitely know who these people are. And so what we would recommend, this is a form of performance training. Just as we had with Jessie's fighters, going through the motions slowly and then at a good pace with and without KAATSU. Try that with your trombone. And so just do cycle and try that. And I won't guarantee it will make you a better player, but I think you'll enjoy it. So piano, guitar, drums, and I would be so bold as to add a trombone to that. Next question is, I'm curious as to if the bands can be purchased with HSA or FSA money. Yes, it can. I get emails marketing them as being approved for HSA, VSA purchases, but I'd rather get the answer from you than trust an email. Yes, we actually worked with TrueMed. I think the company, yes, TrueMed, and all of the processes and approval forms are set. I don't know the exact number of people who have purchased KAATSU with their HSA or FSA funds, but that goes through. Not a problem. How best to use my KAATSU B2 with a power plate? I am just a beginner. If you're a beginner, as Kenzie and Jessie have often said, work into it. A power plate with KAATSU. There have been people who have done KAATSU on their legs with a power plate, and it was just too much. It was just too much. And the thing that we fear is a user falls. Why? Because the lactate that builds up in the thigh and the hamstrings and the calves is just too much. And the last thing we want you to do is fall while you're on a power plate. As Kenzie mentioned a few times before, start off very, very gently. Maybe you even want to start off with on your arms, as she suggested to Rick, I think, on rucking. Kenzie, do you have any recommendations here?
Yeah, I would say, kind of going back to what has been said before, but this was something where I'm using the bands and I want to use a power plate. I've never done it before. I would start off just with one cycle or one set in that cycle mode. See how that feels, especially if I've done it on my arms, felt fine. But if I were to go through exercises on a power plate with my leg bands on, I would really just start with one set. See how you feel. If it gasses you right away, then we kind of have our answer. We have that baseline, but then we can work up into improving. But that's kind of just a different way, I would say, that we could start off just slowly working our way up to it, and also taking our safety into precaution and into consideration. You may even do it, standing next to maybe a railing or something where if you do feel like you're going to lose your balance, you know that you have something that can help regain that stability and prevent a fall.
Great. And I want to thank Jessie and Kenzie for participating and sharing their expertise. I couldn't recommend any two better people than Kenzie and Jessie. If you ever have the opportunity to meet any of them or learn more from them, either on a one-on-one, virtually, etc. Jessie will put you through a killer foundation training session, and Kenzie, you've seen what she can, how she approaches KAATSU and becoming more active. So thank you all. I appreciate everybody's time. And if you have any more questions, just info@kaatsu.com and we'll follow right up with you. So thank you again, Kenzie and Jessie. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steven.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.